Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, wal aqibatu lil muttaqeen, wa la udwana illa ala dhalimin, wa afdalu salati wa atammu taslim ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina wa habibina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Allahumma su ikhwana fi Palestine, Allahumma su ikhwana min Palestine, rahmatika ya ahmar rahimin, ya ahmar rahimin, ya ahmar rahimin. Beloved brothers and sisters in Islam, I'm your brother Dawud with you, the executive director of CAIR Michigan, and I'm going to bring on my colleague right now, Sister Amy, who is our staff attorney. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So what we want to do very briefly is for the viewing audience is a few things. Number one is to let you all know or update about the cases and the increase of cases that have come across our desk at CAIR Michigan. Our national office released statistics last week, and we wanted to go over some of our state statistics. Our office in the past 2 months has seen a 300% increase in case intake in comparison to this time last year. 300%, which is staggering. And much of this has to do with the current fitna that is taking place throughout Palestine. I just don't limit it to Gaza. I mean, that's the worst of it. But even as it relates to the aggression that's taking place in the West Bank and the amount of anti-Muslim and anti-Palestinian sentiments that are pervading our state. So we want to go over those some of those statistics with you as far as where is the problem most acute and what we are doing here in our office regarding that. And just to let the viewing audience know, just for clarification, because we've received some, and excuse the lighting, our office, has received some calls or requests about, why haven't we endorsed certain rallies or why haven't we organized certain rallies? And the answer to that is very simple, that as a board policy, CAIR Michigan chapter of CAIR has a limited capacity, right? And our capacity is that we deal directly with civil rights cases and discrimination to American Muslims, and particularly Muslims in the state of Michigan. So we are very concerned about Palestine and what's going on. We've given Know Your Rights presentations regarding the civil liberties of how people should know their rights in regards to protesting and the rallying. We are for letting people know about their civil liberties. The issue going on of doxing at universities, what people can do, what can be done, what cannot be done. So we deal with it from that angle. School bullying, etc. But as far as speaking directly on foreign policy issues, that's not CAIR Michigan's expertise, and we have a very modest staff. We only have 4 staffers besides the interns that we have, so we don't even have the bandwidth or capacity. Besides us not being a foreign policy or organization, we've had a 300% case intake, so we're dealing with these cases reactively, as well as the proactive work that we have to do as an office regarding the other issues that are going on. Because just because Gaza is being bombed didn't stop the other issues that we have to deal with as a Muslim community, right? And the cases that come in regarding police accountability, racial profiling of non-Arab Muslims, etc. Right? So we still have these issues that we have to deal with. So I'm going to take myself off the screen and let Sister Amy talk about the percentages, where the problems are most acute right now, give you a little update, then I will come back on the screen and I'm going to make mention about protesting and rallies in particular. There's certain things that I think that we need to be aware of in regards to rallies and protests that are taking place, including issues of people being arrested, right, at rallies and protests. And I think that there needs to be some clarification so that we know we're more familiar, like with our not just our rights, but our responsibilities, and what type of jeopardy or peril that we could be putting ourselves in regards to rallies and protests. So with that, Sister Amy, Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. As Brother Dawud said, we've received really an unprecedented amount of intakes over the last 60 plus days since October 7th. The numbers really is staggering. One of the things I want to impart on everybody is that the most concern we have that comes into CAIR Michigan are related to school and school administration issues. And this was nearly 40% of all of our intakes since since October 7th, nearly 40% of all of our intakes that are related to Palestine, because as Brother Dawud said, we are still receiving intakes related to just general employment discrimination issues, issues facing our incarcerated Muslim brothers and sisters that are, within the scope of our normal casework. So when I'm talking about these numbers, I'm talking specifically about incidences that are reported to our office that are arising out of the October 7th and the events that have followed since then. So about 40% of those intakes are related to school administration issues. And when I talk about school administration issues, we're talking about several different things. We're talking about unfair and unnecessary discipline of our student population, both in our K through 12 schools, but also in our schools, our colleges and universities. So for instance, we've received, a lot of complaints about school students in K through 12 school, especially high schools, being disciplined for engaging in different types of protests that have taken place at school, whether it's a walkout protest, whether it's sit-in protests, or whether it's just, a vocal protest during a conversation or the hanging of a sign in a locker or things of that nature. We've seen students being disciplined really, really unfairly with regards to that. In fact, we've seen more students being in K through 12 schools being called, being accused of being harassing or committing hate crimes, or creating an intimidating environment for doing nothing more than speaking out against the state of Israel, or having some political sign that's related to criticism of the state of Israel. And they're really being disciplined under a code of conduct that is intended for people who are creating a safety risk or a threat on these high school campuses. Like, for instance, if you're engaging in repeated bullying of a student that's based on faith or race, that's what these code of conducts are used for. And we've seen people who have, engaged in drawing on flags, Israeli flags, or attempting to tear or rip an Israeli flag, being charged under a hate crime allegation with the public school. And that's just not appropriate. It's, the Supreme Court of the United States has really understood that anytime you're desecrating a political flag, and let's be honest, the Israeli flag is a political flag. It's not a religious flag. But anytime you're desecrating a political flag, it is a valid form of protest. It is a valid form of political speech, and it could never be a hate crime when it's not when you engage in an activity that's not directed at any single individual, or doesn't have the intent to intimidate a single individual or a group of individuals. People burn the American flag all the time. They tear the American flag all the time, and it is seen as a legitimate form of protest. And yet we're seeing our students, our K through 12 students, being disciplined over and over and over again for engaging in what is inherently political speech. And it's based on our institution's rush really to overreact to these types of things, so that they're not called out in the media, so that they're not called out at board meetings and things like that. Which is why it's very important that as individuals and as entities, we stand up and say, we're not going to stand for this. You're not going to make our students silent, to appease one group of people, while you're harming, the well-being and the emotions of our students and our group of people. So that's what makes these types of things, very problematic. because we've seen on college campuses, we've seen, arrests. We've seen the silencing of people who are engaging in political discourse. I think just a couple weeks ago or last week, there was the silencing of U of M students. They wanted to pass a resolution, and through the Senate. And the Senate is a democratically elected body of students within the university. They're elected by their peers, and they speak for their peers in much the same manner that our Congress speaks for us when we vote them into power, right? They have the power of the majority behind them, and yet they were debating and going to vote on these two resolutions, and the school stepped in and said, you can't do that because you don't speak for every single student individually, which is just not the case. That's the purpose of having these democratically elected student governments. So it's these types of administrative, activities that are concerning for our youth, because it's stifling their ability to represent their feelings and engage in political discourse that is held to be a fundamental right of the U.S. Constitution. The framers of the Constitution really believe that more discourse is better for society than less discourse, right? Because that's how the free flowing of ideas is how we bring about change and we bring about goodness and understanding in the world. And if you're silencing one viewpoint because it is unpopular at this time, you're stifling that growth. And our public schools, K through 12, and college and the universities should be engaging in that type of discourse, because that's what world education is about for our youth, which is what makes it so problematic. And in addition to the problems that we're seeing on campuses and in K through 12 schools with regards to actions being taken by the administration against students, we're also seeing about 13% of our intakes are related to comments that are being made either by teachers or by administrators that are inherently biased or just outright Islamophobic. We've seen teachers at different schools saying things like, Hamas are practicing Muslims, as if they get to decide who's a practicing Muslim. But the reason that they're doing that is because of the implication that it causes and the fear that it causes among society for for people who are practicing Muslims or people who are visibly Muslim, like myself and other Muslim women, right? So they're talking about how practicing Muslims are creating this hostile and violent environment, and they're engaging in acts of quote unquote terrorism. And that's a problem. That's a problem because we know as parents and adults that students look up to teachers. They're seen as an authority in the classroom. So they're influencing all of the non-Muslim students. And this amounts to bias-based bullying. But the difference is, instead of being peer-on-peer bullying, it's really like teacher on student bullying. So in addition to, having students being told that they're practicing Muslims, we've had engaging in terrorist activities. We have teachers who are incorrectly providing historical accounts of what's going on in Israel. And then when students are standing up to the teacher saying, what you're saying is just not factually accurate, the teacher is dismissing them, telling them it doesn't matter what you say anyways. And then we see administration not taking any action against the teacher, or not taking any action until it's too late and the harm has already been caused. We had a case where a substitute teacher did something that was very Islamophobic. They went on a rant for 30 minutes about Muslims, about Palestinians, about Arabs, and equating all of these things to what happened on 9/11 in a way that was very inappropriate. And we saw the students immediately go to the principal and complain. Nothing was done. We saw the parents go to the principal and complain, and nothing was done. And then when our director of safe spaces got involved, the principal finally, after a month and a half, issued an apology and indicated that teacher would no longer be working there. But we have other instances where we have schools in our area where a counselor is using words like terrorist in the office, directed at students. And then when the student complains about it, the student's being told, this is kind of just a term that I was using. I was just kind of joking. And that counselor's still there. And then now the student is uncomfortable to go to school and uncomfortable to use resources at the school. And these are the types of statements that are resulting in complaints to our office 13% of the time. We also have Islamophobia and hate speech being a problem. We have students on campus that are being targeted by supporters of Israel, and they're being followed around college campuses, being called terrorists, being said that I don't like people who look like you. I don't like people from where you're from, being spit at. We had incidences where like road rage incidences where a student had a gun pulled on them as a result of having bumper stickers on their car that say they were pro-Palestinian, and we have law enforcement dismissing these actions as being, nothing to see here, and in the inverse of that, we have police issuing reports and issuing like security risk statements for somebody who's doing nothing but removing posters from a public space like a utility pole where things are not supposed to be posted anyways. So that's the kind of disparate treatment we see when we're facing hate speech and hate crimes versus what's going on when somebody's doing an activity that is not directed at anybody, but then they're being treated as inherently dangerous and problematic, which is one of the ways that law enforcement has acted towards people like disfavored people like over the generations. It's a way of othering people and creating this discourse that has led to directly to things that are happening overseas. And we have seen like a rise in employment discrimination cases that are arising directly out of the October 7th incident. We've seen terminations, we've seen disciplines, we've seen employers who have different kinds of groups for support groups, not allowing like Muslim support groups. And 8.5% of our cases are rising directly out of employment-related matters, whether it's an employer who's calling in employees because they have been, active on social media, posting in favor of Palestine, whether it's comments being made by employers to employees about, Islam, about the practice of Islam, or like whether we've had incidences where people are making comments to their coworkers, and then that's then reported to HR, and HR is taking no action despite the fact that somebody's creating a hostile working environment for Muslims by asking them inappropriate questions, making inappropriate statements. So we're receiving difficult experiences in the workplace. So these are the top 5 issues that we're having, and these are not all of them. We've seen FBI coming and knocking on people's doors to ask them about what's going in Palestine. We recently had a travel issue related to somebody being asked about a Palestinian national in Michigan when they were returning from overseas, and then they were asked about an acquaintance that they have who's a Palestinian national in Michigan, and they were asked questions about how well they knew this person and what they might be engaged in. So right now, these are the types of issues that we're dealing with at CAIR Michigan. In addition to doxing is another one that's a really big problem. We get calls every day from somebody who's been doxed online and now has a fear for their safety as a result of having information released and having death threats issued. And then recently, I think Brother Dawud is going to talk about this, but really recently we've been seeing arrests of people at peaceful protests, both on college campuses and then recently in Royal Oak. And I think Brother Dawud, inshallah, is going to speak to that a little bit more.
Thank you very much, Sister Amy. And for those of you in the viewing audience, if you have a question for Sister Amy, a general question, you can pose the question in the comment section and we will get to it. If you have a specific legal question regarding an incident that took place to you, that will not be answered online live. You need to contact our office, and I'm going to update the banner to put our number in, and you can call. Just let me make a few additional comments before I get to this particular issue in terms of the protesting. So yes, we have seen a 300% increase in our case intake in comparison to the similar 2-month period last year. At the same time, we are here to take your intakes. Email us and call the office number. We will get back with you. We are not over capacitated in the sense that we aren't able to respond to your calls, right? If you call over the weekend, then there may be some lapse in getting back with you on Monday. But there's some information that's been spreading through some sections of the community that's totally false, that says, oh, we don't need to call CAIR Michigan because they are so inundated with cases, they don't have the bandwidth even to call you back. That's simply not true. Now, if you have our staff attorney's phone number or my phone number, don't think that you're going to send a text at 10 o'clock at night and get a response back. Like, if you have our number and call, uh, make sure that it's an emergency, right? Like, someone either has gotten arrested, like, or there's like a hate crime or like an arson attack. It has to be something of like imminent threat or danger. But if you got harassed at your workplace, that doesn't rise to the level of like imminent danger. Like, that's something that can be called in and we will get back with you next day. But it's not something that you text at 10 o'clock at night and you expect a call back at 10, 11 o'clock at night, or you ask us for some statistics via text. And if we don't get back to you within like 12 hours and you're saying CAIR Michigan's not responsive, like this isn't the right way to do things, right? And I'm saying that because this is unfortunately some things that have gotten back to me and to some of our board members. This is one thing. The second thing is that, as Sister Amy mentioned, subhanAllah, many of the cases that we have gotten relates to students at public schools, universities, colleges, and also high schools. So there's harassment on campus from students, outside groups, teachers, and also administrators. We've been in direct communication and working with different student groups at least 3 different universities, giving advice, giving Know Your Rights presentations on these campuses, and taking calls in general from students at high schools as well as parents. And let me say this, that mashallah, for the young adults, and I don't talk to you like children, like according to Islamic law, if you're 15 and older, you are mukallaf or mukallafa according to the sacred law. You are a young adult. You're responsible for your deen. Of course, you still need mentorship if you're in high school, university, but you are a young adult, right? And we will treat you with that respect that a young adult should be treated, and with the maturity level that you should be treated with, that you would act accordingly. But we are really happy in the sense that the amount of resilience from our young people, our young adults, who aren't weak, who aren't broken, who aren't like this group of people that need to be coddled. They are standing up for their rights. They're not overly scared. Mashallah, in many ways, they're handling things a lot better now than what was taking place on college campuses after 9/11. Right? Because we're old enough to remember. I remember how it was, as being a younger Muslim, and how the environment was in 2001, 2002. And mashallah, I think these young adults are handling things with a lot of poise and with a lot more determination and courage that really was that we saw like a little over 2 decades ago. So we salute you for that. And also to let the adults know, and I have 4 children in college right now, right? Mashallah. Just as a reminder for a little history lesson or civics lesson, that when there were the protests during the civil rights era, right? The boycotts, the people sitting in Walgreens and Woolworths practicing civil disobedience, they weren't people with gray in their beard like me that were the main people doing that. Those were people who were primarily high school students, and some who were in college, the ones who were getting hot coffee poured on them in the Walgreens in North Carolina, right? Or having dogs sicked on them in Alabama. Like this is my parents' generation, right? So it is to say that normally when we see issues of civil disobedience or protests, normally it's going to be the younger people, and it's not people who are the gray beards or the old heads who are the ones out in the streets, right? So that's just something to remember. We saw this in the civil rights movement. Same thing in the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa, is led by young people, by young adults. Now going to the protests, those of you who are going out to protests, and we have to be very clear about something, is that when you are going out to protest regarding any cause, so marching or protesting on the sidewalks is always fine as long as that you leave some area where people can walk through. However, when we're talking about protesting in the streets, we don't have the unlimited right to block traffic, right? I have been involved in organizing protests regarding police brutality in the city of Dearborn with Reverend Charles Williams, part of National Action Network. We did the same thing in regards to Inkster regarding police brutality, where we literally marched on streets, but there were permits that were pulled for that, right? But if you're going to block an entire street where cars come through, in which emergency vehicles come through as well, because on any major public road, there's an expectation or know that emergency vehicles can come through, then know that if there's no permit and the police ask you to go on the sidewalk, they are not 100% obligated to let you march on a major road and block traffic. If you do that and you have a civil disobedience, then you should also expect that you can be arrested. So if you are going to do that and practice civil disobedience, knowing that you're going to get arrested, that number one, if there is a protest organized, there should be legal observers. There should be, number two, people who are filming the protests at a rally to make sure that there are no excesses of like police brutality. Number three, there should be a bail fund if you go and block a street. Or I saw something recently, like they're going to do a die-in somewhere at a municipality, the same municipality where a young man just got arrested. No, if you go and do that die-in in a public area and they ask you to go, you don't go, you most likely will be arrested, right? So then is there a bail fund set up? And like the fakir, like I was arrested protesting in front of former Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan's office in Washington, D.C. Actually, I was the only Black guy at the protest. They came and got me first and put the handcuffs on extra tight, because that's what happens to Black men. Like who were the first ones to get criminalized and get targeted, right? It was a protest with Muslims as well as Jewish people, including like our friends at Jewish Voices for Peace. This was years ago, like 5 or 6 years ago. Like I've been arrested at protests. But just know and understand, like we don't have the unreserved right to say, oh, these are our streets, and because we're passionate about Gaza, Palestine, that we can just go and just block major roads or major public spaces and not leave areas for people to travel or protest without the expectation of potentially getting arrested, right? So we have to say that we don't have our free speech rights, or freedom of assembly rights, I should say, not free speech, but freedom of assembly. Our freedom of assembly is not completely unrestricted. It's not like mutlaq. It's muqayyid, if I can use language of Islamic law. There are some restrictions, right? So just know and understand that. So you contact our office, say, oh, such and such got arrested because they were here or they were there. And I mean, and then it rises to a criminal offense. We are sympathetic to the cause, but we don't deal in criminal law, number one, as an organization. So we can't come there to bail you out. That's number one. And then number two, the thing is that maybe your civil rights actually were not violated, right? And that's just a reality, right? So if you're going to practice in the name of protesting civil disobedience, and know that this can happen, right? And just have that expectation. The other point I'd like to make, and maybe Sister Amy wants to make a comment about this, but the other point that I'd like to make is like, look, we as a civil rights organization, civil liberties organization, and we're coming to the end of the year, one thing that gives me, and I use this word sharaf, or honor, working at the Michigan chapter of CAIR, the Council on American-Islamic Relations, is that we are what is called FUBU, is for us, by us, meaning that we are not funded by big foundations, like to the right or to the far left or to the right. Like we don't get George Soros money, or we don't get like Conservative Religious Liberty Foundation money. We don't get any money. We've never gotten a single dime from any foreign waqf or any foreign government. Right. So we're not funded by any foreign government, no Gulf government, no Turkish government, no nothing. Right. And this is a myth about CAIR, that we somehow get funded by governments or endowments overseas. This is not true. But we don't get this foundation money. We get funded by you, by our community, our constituents. And that's how we are able to have the freedom and the integrity. So whether it's standing for our religious liberties in regards to public schools, in regards to books and curriculum being shoved down our students' throats, or be it relationship this issue of Palestine, and standing for the free speech rights of our students, universities or in public schools, is that we aren't controlled by other people. Like, who funds you runs you. So we're not controlled by outside people, and we're not indebted to them. We are doing khidmah on your behalf, right? So it is the community's responsibility to fund us, to not only continue our work, but that we maintain this independence, so that we are not we aren't silenced or involved in self-silence or self-censorship. Because what happens many times when Muslim nonprofits take large amounts of money, or maybe even all of their money, from outside interests, they suppress their own selves and their own positions they can take on certain things, because they're scared of losing their money. They're scared of losing their sources, right? And best believe that if any Muslim organization is predominantly funded by non-Muslims, we are being used in their chess game, right? They don't believe in Allah. They don't believe in the Quran. They don't believe in the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They don't believe in the ijma of the Salaf, of our righteous predecessors, right? They don't have this. So if they're funding us, it is funding us to use us in their chess game, right? So we work on your behalf. So this is why I want to say, I had to be very clear about this. And the other point to be very clear about is that when you donate to CAIR Michigan, know that a percentage of our money every year we give to our national office. Our national office doesn't give us any money. So if you give to our national office, alhamdulillah, we don't see a dime of that. But the percentage of our money goes to the national office because of our coordination, our branding, and things like this. So when you give to CAIR Michigan, you are also helping the national movement that is called CAIR, right? If you give to CAIR National, alhamdulillah, you've given to CAIR National. I'm not saying you don't. And you should give some money to CAIR National, but know that that doesn't do anything for our resources, our advertisements, our budgets, our filing our lawsuits. We don't get a single dime of that. So I just wanted to clarify that, because many people are unaware about how CAIR chapters are structured in relationship to the national network. I'd like to add anything on, Sister Amy, before we conclude. I don't see any comments, but if you want to make any comments about anything, especially about the protests or the rallies, you can, and then we will close out.
Sure. So I think you did a great job, like, explaining the protests. I agree. I think whenever we give this talk, this Know Your Rights presentation about protesting, like, my main two comments and reminders to people is any law enforcement encounter that you have or that you see taking place, always film it. Because if there's a discrepancy between what the police officer says and what you said, the police officer is going to be given the benefit of the doubt and you're not, but the camera never lies, right? So always film all police encounters, and also take the badge number and name of every officer that you interact with at any police encounter that you're having, and then follow up, with the department if you think your civil rights have been violated in those circumstances. But the biggest tool that we can use right now is our cell phone. Every cell phone right now is equipped with a camera, and we should be using it liberally while we're out in public, engaging in any form of protest or civil disobedience.
Thank you very much, Sister Amy. So again, please make your complaints made to us. I'm going to put our right now in the chat our phone number, office number, so that you can call. Please give us a call if you have any complaints regards to any discrimination or anything that's taken place. We are here to serve you at CAIR Michigan. And besides just your complaints, we also need these for statistics, right? So the Anti-Defamation League, which we do not have good relations with at all, who is part of the Islamophobia network, we believe, and is one of the biggest Zionist occupation organizations in these United States of America. One thing is that when they go to elected officials, they have statistics, and their community complains about everything, reports everything to them. Whereas we sometimes want to go to other organizations outside the Muslim community or don't report it at all. So as we've had a 300% increase in case intake, we are fully aware that we still have not gotten all the cases. It's probably even much higher than that, right? But they complain. I'll give an example of of how they complain. Because some of our Muslim students were caught up in this. I'm not going to mention the district, but in one district in southeastern Michigan, some Muslim students weren't used to speak to a particular student who is Zionist and Jewish. Once this fitna started, or expanded, I should say, after October 7th, and what was taking place in Gaza, they basically stopped talking to him. This guy complained and went to the administration and said that their silence is violence. Listen, their silence is violence. They used to speak to me prior. Now they're not speaking to me. I feel intimidated. I feel scared. Their silence is violence. This got reported to the ADL. Then next thing you know, Muslim youth in this particular high school started getting called to the office and interrogated about why they aren't speaking to this Zionist student, as if we don't have the right as students or anywhere, if we don't want to carry any superfluous conversation with anyone outside of something direct. Like, we don't have to. You're not morally obligated as a student in school, or you're not legally obligated as an employee at a workplace to not have like superfluous talk. But this stuff got reported to the school administration, to the teachers, and to the Anti-Defamation League. And they count this as anti-Semitism, that these Muslim students weren't speaking to them or this student, and other students complained. They count this as proof of anti-Semitism, which of course we know this isn't being anti-Jewish, right? So my point of it is, their statistics are inflated, whereas we don't do as good of a job of contacting CAIR, because CAIR is the only Islamically based organization in America that actually keeps statistics on hate crimes and discrimination against Muslims. We're the only ones, and we're not an Arab organization. The Arab Americans are a very important part of our community, but as we know, the majority of Arab Americans in the United States are not Muslims, and the majority of Muslims, including our case intake, are not Arabs, right? So they're not one and the same. So just know that we need our people to call us so that we can get the full breadth of actually what's going on, so that we can have better statistics. So when we go to places like some of these city council meetings, like in Canton, Michigan, for instance, tonight, or if we're going to meet with politicians, like how I had a meeting with Congresswoman Alyssa Slotkin with some other Muslim, with some imams. We met with Alyssa Slotkin, for instance, right? Then we can have even more accurate statistics about what's going on. This is very, very important, my brothers and sisters in Islam. So, if that, we conclude this brief legal intake, and I ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who's the Lord of the mighty throne, to protect you and to protect all of your loved ones. I ask Almighty Allah Azza wa Jal to grant relief to the people of Palestine. I ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect the people of Palestine. I ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant patience to the people of Palestine and to their family members who are in Michigan, who are in America, and all throughout the world. We ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to also protect the people of Lebanon, who've also been suffering some attacks in regards to the aggression of the Israeli military. We ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help Muslim brothers and sisters all throughout the world who are suffering calamities right now in Sudan and in China, in Myanmar, in occupied Kashmir. Kashmir has been occupied just as long as in Palestine. We ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help them to lift up these calamities, Ya Allah, by the right of our love for Al-Habib al-Mustafa Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And we ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us to be amongst the spenders fi sabilillah in his path. Allahumma ij'alna min al-munfiqin. We ask Almighty Allah to make us be amongst the spenders fi sabilillah. We ask Almighty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have us overcome our egos and to do what we are doing for the sake of Allah, for Allah, with the help of Allah, and by the sacred law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given to his messenger Al-Habib al-Mustafa Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal asri innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilus salihati wa tawasaw bil haqq wa tawasaw bis sabr.